In the sweltering heat of summer 1983, 5 young cousins disappeared without a trace from their grandparents' remote farm in rural Texas. The only sign they left behind was a single red sneaker abandoned near the rusting lip of an old, sealed cistern. For decades, the case haunted the community, unsolved, untouched, a wound buried under silence and soil. But 41 years later, during what should have been a routine plumbing job, a discovery emerged from the shadows. One so horrific it would reawaken Split Creek's darkest mystery, and expose a secret buried not just in the earth, but in the hearts of those who called it home. March 14, 2024. The only reason they were found was because the toilet wouldn't flush. At 3:42 p.m., an independent plumber named Jacob Trillo was sent to inspect a blockage. His routine led him to the southeastern corner of the barn, where a corroded cistern lay half swallowed by overgrowth and decades of neglect. Expecting clogged pipes or perhaps the carcass of a raccoon, Jacob unscrewed the rusted cap. What greeted him instead was the unmistakable curve of a human jawbone, still attached to a child's skull, wedged between ancient pipework and sun-bleached scraps of fabric. Within 2 hours, local law enforcement had roped off the Carter property, and by sundown, 4 more skulls had been recovered from the dark, damp depths of the cistern. All belonged to children. The cistern had been unused since the early 1980s, sealed tight and long forgotten. The last time anyone had seen the Carter children was the summer of 1983. Their vanishing had split the town like a fault line. July 16, 1983. The sun had barely risen over the brittle mesquite trees when the 5 Carter cousins scattered barefoot through the dry pasture, their laughter ringing like birdsong over the cracked earth. It was the kind of summer morning that felt endless, cloudless, wild, full of promise. Bertie Carter, their grandmother, had called after them from the porch, waving a wooden spoon still slick with bacon grease. "Stay where I can see you, and keep away from the well." But the children, drunk on freedom and July heat, didn't listen. Not when the field behind the barn whispered adventure. By sunset, the laughter had gone quiet, and so had everything else. The children were all under 12. Casey, 11, was the de facto leader. Scrappy, freckled, with skinned knees and a smirk that dared the world to try him. His sister Annie, 9, trailed behind him, soft-spoken and observant, collecting shiny rocks and caterpillars as if the earth were offering her secrets. Benji, their wiry cousin from Odessa, had a slingshot in his pocket and dreams too big for his small body. Darla, 7, had braided her own hair that morning for the first time, and Caleb, just 5, still spoke with a lisp, clutching his beloved stuffed dog Rupert wherever he went. They were last seen around 9:30 a.m. by Rowdy Gaines, a field hand working the back lot. He'd spotted them running toward the tree line, where the Carter land met a bone-dry creek bed. "Saw 'em heading off," he told police. "Didn't think much of it." But by lunchtime, the silence settled heavy. No footsteps on porch boards, no screen door slamming, no shouts for lemonade or peanut butter crackers, just the relentless buzz of cicadas and the low drone of the box fan. Bertie made the 911 call at 12:17 p.m., voice trembling as she gave their location, an address that sat halfway between nowhere and a place even more forgotten. "They just vanished," she whispered. "All 5 of them. My babies." By 2 p.m., Sheriff Buck Halpern arrived with 2 deputies, their uniforms already damp with sweat. Halpern was a week from retirement. He'd planned to spend the day watching the Astros game. Instead, he stood next to the Carter family's rusted-out Ford tractor, staring across an empty pasture that felt colder than it should have. The search began. Dogs were brought in. Neighbors joined hands, combing through the barn, the hayloft, the old corn crib, the woodshed. Even the dried creek bed. Caleb's stuffed dog Rupert was found by the fence post next to the cistern, one floppy blue ear ripped clean off. It would be the only trace they ever found. The cistern itself appeared untouched, sealed with an iron cap welded into the concrete. According to Bertie's late husband, it had been shut since 1974, when the well water turned bad. A newer tank had been installed behind the house, and the old cistern was left to rust and disappear beneath weeds and disuse. But people remembered the warnings. Stay away from the well. Too deep, too dark, too easy to fall. Some whispered about ghosts, about old secrets left to rot. But for years, they were only stories. Until the children vanished. Then the whispers became screams. News crews descended by the third day. The headline stretched across local broadcasts. 5 cousins missing, Texas town baffled. Images of dusty fields and fading Polaroids looped on repeat. Volunteers flooded in from Leech, from Amarillo. The Red Cross set up tents. Helicopters scoured the skies. Federal agents in suits asked Bertie the same questions over and over. Suspicion bloomed. Some pointed fingers at Rowdy Gaines. Others blamed a traveling carnival that had passed through the week before, but nothing stuck. And eventually, the noise faded. No ransom, no sightings, no bodies, just 5 children gone. By 1984, the FBI had pulled out. By 1986, the reward money dried up. By 1988, the rest of the Carter family moved away, unable to survive the grief etched into every fence post and door hinge. But Bertie stayed. "I can't leave them," she said. In 1993, the county resealed the cistern as part of a new safety ordinance requiring all abandoned wells to be registered or closed. Nobody opened it, not really. The paperwork was bureaucratic, not investigative. And Bertie, she kept sitting on that porch until the day she died in 2023. At age 91, blind, silent, but still setting 5 plates for Sunday lunch. Until March 2024, no one had touched the cistern in over 40 years. And what the plumber found inside? It wasn't just the Carter children. Not all the bones matched. Some were older, much older. March 15th, 2024. The first thing Detective Mara Vance noticed when she stepped onto the Carter property was the silence. Not just the hush of an old house or the stillness of a dead town, but the kind of silence that hangs like a weight, like the ground itself is holding its breath. The barn sagged in the distance, its roof blistered from decades of Texas heat. A backhoe stood frozen beside the open cistern, its yellow arm outstretched like a creature caught mid-motion. Crime scene tape fluttered in the wind. Officers milled around with evidence bags and tired eyes. They paused when Mara passed, nodding in quiet respect. She was known for reviving cases long since buried, some metaphorically, some literally. That's why she was here. Because the Carter children were not the only ones lost on this land, and Split Creek's secrets were far from finished unraveling. They had called her the night before, just after local deputies recovered a second partial skeleton. Smaller, more fragile. The bones were thin as willow branches, delicate, underdeveloped. Juvenile. A femur that hadn't fused, a skull missing its jaw. Sheriff Dan Hargrove, Halpern's successor, now more bureaucrat than sheriff, nearly dropped his phone when the forensics lab called back. Child remains, estimated death, sometime in the 1980s. Detective Mara Vance crouched beside the open cistern, its iron cap now sliced clean through the weld line. Below her yawned a circular void, stone-lined and slick with moisture. The air reeked of rust and minerals. Old water, sour secrets. She pulled on her gloves. "What do we have?" she asked a nearby forensic tech. Lydia Reyes, clipboard pressed tightly to her chest, looked like she was bracing for impact. 3 skulls so far, Reyes said. 2 definitely children. 1 older, late teens or maybe early 20s. We've pulled multiple long bones, fragments of clothing, and... She hesitated, as if the words themselves were heavy. "We found toys, plastic pieces, decayed cloth, a child's shoe." "Anything modern?" Mara asked. Reyes shook her head. "Everything looks old. Predates 1990. One of the dolls is stamped 1981. Mara straightened, her heart clenching. The timeline was tightening. DNA testing will take time, Reyes added. But the sizes line up. 5 missing cousins, Mara murmured, mostly to herself, in daylight, from this exact property. Inside the barn, a makeshift command post hummed with quiet tension. On a splintered table, someone had laid out a weathered manila folder. The label, Carter Case, 1983. Stamped, closed. Mara flipped it open. The original reports were typewritten, some barely legible through faded ink. Sheriff Halpern's handwritten notes bled into the pages in shaky blue script. Bertie Carter reports 5 children last seen heading east through the pasture, toward old fence line. No sign of struggle, no footprints beyond dry patch near cistern. Dog located at base, torn ear, no blood. Dog searched, no scent beyond 50 yards. Cistern noted, sealed, no visible access. Carnival lead cleared, Rowdy Gaines lead cleared, stranger abduction unconfirmed. One word had been circled in red ink near the bottom of the page. Unfounded. Mara snapped the file shut. By mid-afternoon, the excavation was fully underway. Archaeologists from the nearby university worked in tandem with the crime scene unit, brushing decades of dirt from bones like they were unearthing ancient history. One lifted a scrap of faded fabric, white with pale pink dots. A child's nightgown. Then a deputy's voice rang out from the barn. "Detective, you're going to want to see this." In the feed room, the floorboards had been pried up. Beneath them, a line of old plumbing, half rotted and capped shut. But someone had altered it. A newer PVC pipe had been spliced in, thin, bright, out of place. It looped beneath the feed trough in a deliberate bend. Not accidental. Intentional. "Drainage? Or insertion?" Mara asked. The deputy scratched his head. "Not sure, but Jacob, the plumber, he said the pressure issue at the farmhouse only started 3 weeks ago." "Backflow?" "No," the deputy said. His voice dropped. It made a sound, like air trying to push through, a squeak. That night, Mara visited Jacob Trillo at his modest home on the edge of town, right beside the last gas station in Split Creek that still sold leaded fuel. He opened the door with tired eyes and a look of quiet guilt. She showed him a photo of the jawbone. "I didn't know what I was looking at," he said. "Thought it was a pig skull, maybe. Old tanks. Things fall in all the time, but something about it felt wrong." He ran a hand over his face. "That pipe," he gestured vaguely. "I didn't install it, but I noticed the squeak, like air was trapped in the line. Not mechanical. It sounded like—" He trailed off. "Like what?" Mara pressed. Jacob hesitated. "Like a voice. Real faint. Just once or twice. A whisper under the water. Couldn't make out words." Back at her motel, Mara laid out the photos from the dig. 5 skulls. A child's toy. Blue fabric that might have been Rupert. And now a possible 6th set of bones that didn't match any Carter child. The cistern wasn't just a grave. It was a vessel. Someone had used it more than once. She returned to the Carter case file and circled one name, Samuel Carter. Bertie's husband, the man who sealed the cistern in 1974, 9 years before the children disappeared. 9 years before anyone was supposed to be down there. March 16th, 2024. Rain fell in quiet sheets across the old cemetery behind Split Creek Baptist Church. Samuel Carter's grave was marked only by a modest headstone. No flowers, no inscription beyond name and dates. Just the rain, and Bertie Carter's ghost hymn on the day they buried him back in 1991. Cause of death, stroke, sudden, alone. Bertie had found him slumped in the barn, dirt on his boots, dried blood in his beard. But the timeline never sat right. Not with Mara. Now, in the back room of the Split Creek Public Records Office, Mara sat surrounded by mildew-stained folders and the hum of an old oscillating fan. She flipped through boxes marked Carter 1970s permits, well registrations, complaints, rural properties. Then she found it. Permit number 88734, filed July 10, 1974. Applicant, Samuel Carter. Request, seal inactive cistern. Reason, water contamination, bacterial bloom, possible animal matter, reinforced steel plate, concrete, inspection, waived. No record of contents, no signature from a county inspector. Instead, it had been co-signed by a neighbor, Lel Vance, her father. That night, Mara drove through sheets of rain to her father's farmhouse. Lel Vance, 81, sharp-eyed, never far from a bottle or a memory, was waiting on the porch, as if he'd known. "Saw your truck," he said, raising a brow. "Figured it was either you or the tax man." Mara didn't smile. She sat beside him, watching the crickets flicker like stars in the grass. "You signed a permit," she said. 1974, the cistern." Lel didn't look at her, just rubbed his jaw. "I remember. You weren't an inspector. Didn't need to be, not back then. Sam wanted it sealed, said the water was bad, steel plate, concrete." "Did you see what was inside?" He took a long, heavy breath. "Number." "He wouldn't let me. But you signed it anyway." He nodded. $50 and 2 bottles of Glenlivet. That meant something back then. Mara watched him. His fingers fidgeted on the armrest. "He was nervous," Lel added. "Not scared, just twitchy. Wouldn't let his kids near the barn. I figured it was an animal. Maybe worse. But I didn't ask." "And you never thought about it again?" she asked, her voice quiet. The wind rose in the trees around them. Lel didn't answer. Not until those kids disappeared. Lel finally said, his voice barely more than gravel and regret. "And by then, Sam was already someone else. Quiet, hollow, like he was walking around, but something inside had gone dead." Back at the station, Mara unrolled the Carter family tree from the cold case archives. Her pen hovered over names worn soft with age. Samuel and Bertie Carter had 2 sons, Thomas and Will. Both had left Split Creek by the late 80s, slipping out of town like ghosts. One moved to Colorado, the other to Mobile, Alabama. Neither had returned after the summer of '83. Neither had spoken publicly. Neither attended their father's funeral. Both had children among the 5 who disappeared. The only one who never left was Bertie. Mara underlined the son's name slowly. Whoever was near that cistern in 1974 knew what had been buried there. And it hadn't been just contaminated water. Later that afternoon, the university team hit a deeper layer in the excavation pit. One of the techs flagged her over, urgency etched into his voice. "Detective, you need to see this." She crouched at the pit's edge. Buried beneath layers of compacted dirt and shattered rock, wedged between 2 chunks of collapsed concrete, was a metal box. Rusted, corroded, but somehow still whole. A weathered toolbox, the kind once carried by blue-collar hands hardened by labor and time. It had a sliding lid, smoothed by years of grip. The team opened it with surgical caution. Inside, a bundle of oiled canvas, the tape around it crumbling at the edges. They peeled it back slowly, revealing a rusted pocket knife with SC carved into the wooden handle, a Polaroid photo damp from decades underground, and a small, warped notebook. Mara's throat tightened. The photograph showed a group of children standing in front of the barn. All of them smiling, but someone had scratched out their eyes. Jagged, angry lines etched by something sharp. The notebook's first page was water-stained but still readable. July 11th, 1974. "It's done. No one will ever find them. The hole took 3 days to dig. Covered the sounds best I could. Buried deep. Used the steel plate like Mr. Vance said. Told Bertie the smell was the water. They'll rot under God's eye. Let him judge me." Mara read that line again. And again. No one will ever find them. But who were they? Who had Samuel Carter buried 9 years before his own grandchildren vanished? And how many more had followed? As dusk draped itself over Split Creek, painting the pasture in long stretching shadows, Mara stood beside the open cistern. The earth no longer felt like simple soil. It breathed. It remembered. This wasn't just a grave. It was a ritual, a pattern. The Carter children weren't the first, and Mara was beginning to fear they hadn't been the last either. March 17th, 2024. By dawn, the entire Carter property was sealed off under a strict lockdown. Yellow police tape stretched from the barn to the distant fence line. Crime scene lights turned the pre-dawn darkness into a surreal white glow. The once overgrown land now looked like a battlefield. 15 feet of disturbed soil in every direction around the cistern. Mara stood at the rim of the dig site, arms crossed tight, her mind 1,000 pieces. "Start over," she said. Dr. Elijah Mott, the university's forensic anthropologist, nodded. He was gaunt, intense, his fingers constantly moving as if tracing invisible patterns. He led her to a flagged area near the pit's southwest edge. "This is the newest layer, 2 juvenile femurs, consistent with the Carter children, but deeper." He knelt and swept a fine brush over packed earth, revealing a faint impression. A circle. No, multiple circles, concentric, etched into the ground, like something heavy had once been pressed there. The outer groove was nearly 6 feet wide. "This isn't natural," Mott said. "Too uniform. Too precise." He dusted away more soil, uncovering a ring of small crosshatch marks, evenly spaced like the ticks of a clock. "Someone made this," Mara whispered. "We think it was a container," Mott said. "Maybe a barrel, left here long enough to leave an imprint, possibly used to store." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. "How old?" Mara asked. "Early 1960s, maybe even late 50s. We've barely scratched the surface." Her breath caught. "Any bone fragments?" Mott nodded slowly. "Partial mandible. Adult. A tooth still embedded. We're cross-referencing with the missing persons database now." Back at the station, Mara filtered through archived files. Split Creek and surrounding counties, pre-1983. Rural disappearances. Her finger stopped on a name. Ava Landry. Age 10. Vanished July 3, 1962. Last seen walking home from Vacation Bible School. Lived on Willow Bend Road, 4 miles from the Carter property. Status unsolved. Then another. Marlon Briggs. Age 7. Gone September 1967. Last seen riding his bike on Route 19. No witnesses, no bike. His property line, adjacent to the Carters. She found more. 3 children. Missing between 1959 and 1972. All within a 6-mile radius of the farm. All unsolved. No one had connected them, until now. That afternoon, she gathered her team in the converted storage room behind the station. Maps, photographs, timelines lined the walls. In the center, an aerial photo of the Carter property, taken in the 1970s. She pointed to the barn. "Every disappearance we can tie to this area, from the Carter kids to the 1962 case, they all trace back to this land." She tapped a point just west of the barn. "This was the original well. It was sealed when the new system was installed in 1961. That means we've got 2 containment systems, one visible, one buried." Deputy Rosal leaned in. "So you're saying Samuel Carter was dumping bodies in both?" Mara shook her head. "I'm saying someone was. Maybe it started with him, maybe not, but I don't believe it ended with him." She pulled up a diagram from the excavation. "We're looking at burial activity that spans at least 3 decades. Deputy Marks, the youngest in the room, raised his hand. "Why kids? Why only children?" Mara didn't look away. She circled a word in red on the board. "Control." "Someone wanted power," she said. "They saw this land not as home, but as dominion. Their own rules, their own graves. Just before dusk, her phone buzzed. The forensics lab. A preliminary dental match had come through. The mandible? Ava Landry. Missing for 62 years. Gone, but never forgotten. Her family had kept a place for her at the Christmas table until the day her mother died, still believing she'd simply run away. Mara's hand trembled as she hung up. That night, she returned alone to the Carter farm. The dig site lay quiet beneath a cold, moonlit sky. The cicadas had stopped. Even the coyotes had gone silent. She stood at the edge of the cistern. The bodies had been removed, the tools packed up, but the hole still gaped open, hungry. She crouched, pressing her palm to the dirt. "Who are you?" she whispered. No reply, just the stillness, and beneath it all, a terrible design, one that had outlived the man who started it. Split Creek, Texas, July 1983/March 2024. Then July 1983. Even before the children vanished, the Carter house had felt wrong, heavy, like the air itself was holding a secret too big to speak aloud. Something terrible had already taken root long before the summer heat arrived. Even before the children vanished, the Carter house had felt wrong, heavy, the kind of weight that went unnoticed until you stepped outside and suddenly found yourself breathing easier. Inside, the adults spoke in hushed tones. Bertie Carter cooked like she was trying to fill the silence, batches of cornbread and stewed okra that no one seemed hungry for. Samuel Carter retreated to the barn every night, hammering, cutting boards, fixing things no one had asked him to fix. Neighbors said it was stress, but those close enough to hear the late-night noises whispered otherwise. That summer, both of the Carter's sons returned to the farm, each bringing their children while their wives stayed behind. Bertie never mentioned why, but gossip traveled faster than trains in Split Creek. Something had happened in Mobile, something worse in Colorado. By July, all 5 Carter grandchildren were under one roof. Casey, Annie, Benji, Darla, little Caleb, ranging from age 5 to 11, all blonde, all pale, all carrying that soft-spoken Carter drawl like it was stitched into their DNA. Every day they played in the fields behind the barn. And then one morning, they didn't come back. Now, in March 2024, Detective Mara Vance sat alone in a dim back room of the Split Creek Public Library. No windows, just the hum of old fluorescent lights and the stale scent of paper dust. Around her, boxes labeled Split Creek, Ledger, 1975 to 1990. She wore gloves, sipped coffee gone cold, and combed through decades of obituaries, police logs, church bulletins, anything that might contain even a whisper of the summer of '83. Then she found it. August 10th, 1983. A letter to the editor, barely a paragraph. Something's not right at the Carter place. We all feel it. The barn light's been on past midnight. Bertie doesn't go into town no more. The preacher says she won't take communion. I saw Samuel burn something behind the shed 3 nights after the kids vanished. He said it was moldy feed, but it smelled like chemicals and wet cloth. I think someone ought to look closer. Name withheld by request. Mara's pulse thundered. This wasn't just town folklore. Someone had tried to sound the alarm, and someone else had buried the letter. She took it straight to Sheriff Hargrove. He was in the evidence room, overseeing the inventory of items pulled from the cistern dig fabric scraps, the rusted toolbox, that photo with scratched-out eyes. He read the letter twice, then looked up. "You think Samuel Carter killed his grandchildren? I think it started long before them," Mara said. "And I think someone helped him keep it hidden." Hargrove folded the paper slowly. "Charging a dead man won't bring justice." "We're not just charging him," she replied. "There's more. There's someone else. This didn't stop in 1983. His brow creased. "You think there was a second perpetrator?" "I think there was a legacy." Late that afternoon, Mara returned to the Carter farm. The air was sharp with the scent of overturned soil and scorched grass. Deputy Rosales flagged her down near the fence line. "Detective," he said, pulling a small box from the back of his cruiser. One of the volunteers found this hidden in the back shed, between the rafters. He opened the lid. Inside, a stack of VHS tapes, wrapped in plastic. Mold bloomed at the edges, but the labels remained. 1979, 1980, 1981. One was marked, Darla, July. Mara's stomach dropped. She carried the box straight to her car and drove to the high school. The station no longer had a working VCR, but the AV closet at Split Creek High still did. The janitor let her in without asking questions. She fed the tape into the player. The screen crackled. Static bled across the image. Then, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, blonde, pale, sitting in a wooden chair in the barn, wearing a yellow sundress, crying softly, light slats falling across her face from the boards above. A man's voice, off camera. "Tell the camera your name." "Darla Carter. And where are you?" "In the princess room." Mara's blood froze. That phrase again. Princess room. The same phrase found whispered on audio in recovered tapes from the Carter house. The camera zoomed in on Darla's face. A scrape marred her cheek. Her eyes flitted toward something, someone, off screen. Then the tape went black. No violence, no explicit acts. But enough. Enough to confirm they'd been recorded. Enough to relabel the case as a child exploitation ring. By the time she returned to the station, a federal agent was waiting. Special Agent Leah Dobbins. Tall, sharp, unsparing. "We're opening a task force," she said. "You'll be looped in, but from here on out, it's multi-state." "Why?" Mara asked. Dobbins gestured toward the evidence bags. "Because these tapes match others we've found in Amarillo. Baton Rouge, Hendersonville. Same handwriting, same labeling, same type of camera." Mara's hands clenched. "How many?" "At least 62. All different children." Dobbins met her eyes. "We think the Carter family was the source, but someone else distributed them." That night, wind lashed the station's parking lot. Mara stood under a bruised sky, watching the storm roll in, and she realized they were only beginning to understand how deep this thing went. March 18th, 2024. Split Creek, Texas. They said Bertie Carter never left the farm. Not when the children disappeared. Not when Samuel died. Not when both her sons cut off contact. For 40 years she lived on that sun-bleached land, rocking on her porch, tending a garden that never bore fruit. Some called her strange, others called her broken, but Mara Vance now knew the truth. Bertie hadn't stayed because she was grieving. She stayed because she was watching. Bertie Carter died in July 2023. No funeral, no obituary. The county handled the burial. No next of kin. No visitors. The house had remained sealed until now. With a warrant in hand, Mara stepped across the threshold. The house smelled of dried herbs and brittle paper. Dust curled in the golden afternoon light. It was still. Too still. Not a home. A shrine. Bertie's bedroom was tucked at the back. On the walls, photographs of children in outdated clothes. Some Mara recognized from Carter family albums. Others, she didn't. Names had been scratched into the photo corners. Eva, Marlon, Jolene. All names Mara had circled in cold case files. All missing children from surrounding counties. Disappeared between 1959 and 1983. Bertie had kept their pictures, framed them, preserved them like they were hers. On her nightstand sat a weather-worn composition notebook. Mara opened it. Inside, dozens of entries in Bertie's cursive. Each one started with a date. Then meals. May 4th, 1981. Oatmeal, milk, apple slice. No talking today. May 5, white bread, peanut butter, weak tea. Spoke Eva in sleep. May 7th, skipped breakfast, refused to wear dress, punished. Mara flipped further. The writing grew erratic. August 9th, 1983. All 5 cried again. Samuel angry, locked cellar. My hands shook too much to braid Darla's hair. August 10th made them kneel. Samuel said the circle must be respected. We are the keepers, not killers. Keepers. Mara slammed the book shut. Bertie hadn't just known. She'd been involved. Later that night, Mara sat in her office surrounded by evidence. Photos, tapes, letters. Now, logs of punishment, rituals. Keepers, circles. She wrote one word at the top of her whiteboard. Cult. This wasn't just a graveyard. It was a belief system, structured, rehearsed, passed down. She recalled Bertie's journal line. The circle must be respected. It struck her like a match. She called Dr. Mott. You mentioned symbols at the base of the pit, she said. Can you be more specific? We thought they were containment, he replied. But one student says they might be ritualistic. I'll send you photos. An hour later, Mara was staring at high-resolution images from the dig. Spirals. Interlocking loops. In the center, 5 small symbols arranged in a perfect circle. 5, not 6, not 4, 5, like the Carter children. Back at the farm, a search team uncovered a small hatch beneath. The kitchen pantry, just 2 feet square, hidden beneath a false panel. Mara climbed down the ladder. The root cellar was cool, dry, preserved. The walls lined with shelves, cassette tapes, journals, Bibles with rewritten verses, familiar scripture but corrupted. And unto the keepers were given the little ones. And they shall not pass from this circle, lest the world be unmade. The earth will take what the womb rejects. Mara stood in the silence of that hidden room and realized this wasn't just about murder. It was doctrine. Only the pure may descend. Mara's stomach twisted. It wasn't just sickness that had festered in that cellar. It was faith. Bertie and Samuel Carter hadn't acted alone, and they hadn't acted out of madness. They believed. They believed in every etched symbol, every silence, every rule of the circle. And in the notebook, written in the margins beside scribbled verses and meal logs, were names. Others. Other keepers. One name stopped her cold. T. Carter, Mobile Branch. Thomas, Samuel and Bertie's son. Father to 2 of the missing children. Still alive, still out there. That night, Mara sat in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, phone in hand, fingers trembling. The number she had was decades old, but according to public records, Thomas Carter still lived at a registered address in Mobile, Alabama. He had never returned to Split Creek, never spoken to media, never answered law enforcement. She pressed call. 1 ring, 2, then, hello? A low male voice. Calm. Too calm. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Mara Vance with the Split Creek Sheriff's Office. I need to ask you some questions about your family. A pause, then, I was wondering when you'd call. Click. The line went dead. March 20th, 2024. Mobile, Alabama. Thomas Carter's house sat behind a faded Baptist chapel, its pale green siding chipped by decades of sun and salt. A limp American flag hung from the porch, colors long since drained by time. As Mara stepped out of the rental car, heat rippled off the concrete like breath from something waiting. She knocked twice. No answer. Knocked again. Louder. The door creaked open an inch. Mr. Carter? She called. This is Detective Vance. We spoke the other day. A beat of silence, then a voice from the shadows. You came all this way to dig up the dead. She pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, thick with mothballs and paper rot. Every curtain was drawn. Religious tracts lined the walls in neat, obsessive stacks. On the mantel, a cracked photo frame of the Carter children. The glass had never been replaced. Thomas Carter stood in the hallway, lit by a single naked bulb. His face was sharp with time, deep lines, hair thinned but combed, hands still. I don't have anything to say to you, he said. Mara didn't flinch. You left Split Creek the day after your children disappeared. You never returned. You never helped. Your name appears in your Mother's journal. T. Carter, Mobile Branch. You're going to talk to me, Mr. Carter, because I think you know exactly what happened to your children. He stared for a long moment, then said, "Come downstairs." The stairs groaned under her weight. The basement opened into a cool, low room. Concrete floor, cinder block walls, one wooden chair beneath a buzzing bulb. But it wasn't the chair that froze her. It was the wall, a hand-painted mural, stretching from corner to corner. 5 childlike figures holding hands beneath a sky of crude stars. In the center, the spiral. The same spiral found at the Carter farm. "The circle," Thomas said. "The covenant." "You painted this?" "My father taught me," he replied. "Said the world was cracking, that only the covenant could keep the darkness out. The children were the offering. Each circle had to be complete. 5 points, always 5. "You're describing ritual sacrifice." "I'm describing order." His hands trembled. "When we stopped, when the circle broke, everything rotted. The land. My brother died. My wife left. You think that's coincidence?" Mara stepped closer. "What happened to your children?" "They weren't mine to keep," he whispered. "They belonged to the circle." "Did you take them?" No answer. She played a recording from her phone. Birdie's journal, August 10th. All 5 cried again. Samuel angry. Locked cellar. My hands shook too much to braid Darla's hair. Thomas's face twitched. I begged him. Told him 5 wasn't needed again so soon. The spirits hadn't asked. But he said the land was hungry. You let him take your children. His hands curled. "There are other tapes," Mara said softly. "Other names, other children. Were you distributing them?" "No." The word burst from him. "Not me. I never filmed. That was who?" "There was a family. Texas Hill Country. We called them the North Branch. After '83, they took over the recordings. Said Birdie got sloppy. We passed the circle to them. You passed it on. They promised to keep it sacred," Thomas said bitterly. "But they sold the tapes. Desecration. That's when the sickness came." Mara's pulse thundered. "How many branches are there?" Thomas's voice dropped to a whisper. 12. Back at the field office, Mara briefed the task force. Thomas Carter was detained. Obstruction, failure to report abuse. No murder charges yet, but they had a path. They had a network. A multi-generational cult structured like a lattice, connected by symbols, language, shared rituals. The Carter children were one circle. There were more. That evening, Mara sat alone in her hotel room. She pulled out the Polaroid from Birdie's wall. 5 children. Not the Carters. Different faces. Same pose. Same scratched-out eyes. She flipped it. Circle 3. Savannah. Date. April 17th, 1975. Tomorrow, she'd request missing persons records from Georgia. Tonight, she stared at that photo until sleep finally came. And even then, she dreamed of the spiral. March 22nd, 2024. Pine Bend, Georgia. The pine forest behind Hillstone Baptist Church had long been whispered about. Ghosts, witches, Civil War deserters, but no one had ever spoken of what Mara now knew was buried there. She stood at the edge of the trees. Cold wind stung her face. In her hand, the coordinates from the back of the photo. 5 children, scratched-out eyes, a spiral in the dirt. This was Circle 3. Agent Nash from the Georgia field office waited with a forensic team and cadaver dog. The pastor had granted them access without protest, claimed the land hadn't been touched in decades. They followed an old footpath into the clearing. That's where she saw it. A depression in the ground. Subtle, deliberate. A ring of dead pine needles, 5 stones spaced evenly around it, each the size of a cinder block, sunken with time. A pentagon. A burial circle. "Ground soft," the text said. "Could be voids." The dog barked, scratched at the center. Mara turned away. She already knew what they'd find. 4 hours later, they unearthed 4 sets of juvenile remains. The 5th grave was empty. Maybe they didn't finish the circle, Nash said, or maybe one escaped. Mara didn't answer. She looked at the trees, at the way they leaned inward, as if watching, listening, as if even the forest remembered. And she knew. This wasn't the end. It was only the next circle. Back at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's temporary outpost, Mara reviewed files under flickering fluorescent lights. The names stared back at her like ghosts. Emily Ray Brighton, 8. Missing, April 1975. Dylan Harris, 7. Missing, May 1975. Joanna Keel, 9. Missing, March 1975. Lucas Page, 10. Missing, April 1975. Each had vanished from a different county. No pattern, no connection, until now. But one name still hadn't been accounted for. The 5th child. The one whose grave was never filled. Mara sifted through Hillstone Baptist's archives, yearbooks, vacation Bible school rosters, faded photographs. And there, in the corner of a class photo dated April 1975, she saw her. Tessa Elwood, age 9. Side ponytail, big smile. The problem? Tessa was last seen on April 16th. So how was she in a photo dated the next day? Mara flipped the photo. A faint pencil scrawl. Circle 3 taken, 4 complete. 5th resisted. Camera stopped working, kept image anyway. Her blood chilled. Tessa had been targeted. Something had gone wrong, and someone had documented the failure. They weren't just killing, they were curating. That night, Mara called the number listed for Tessa's brother. He lived in North Carolina now, in his 50s, but he still remembered the day Tessa vanished. She went to church, he said, never came home. Then he paused. But 2 weeks later, a man came to the house, said he was from the church, handed my mom an envelope, said it was a love gift to help her grieve. What was inside? Cash, brand new bills, and a drawing. 5 kids holding hands. My sister was in the middle. You could tell by the ponytail. Do you still have it? A long silence. Then, I think so. The next morning, the brother overnighted the envelope. Inside, $500 in crisp 1975 currency and a piece of yellowed sketch paper. Mara unfolded it. 5 stick-figure children in a circle, one drawn in red, the one in the middle, the one with a ponytail. That night, in her motel room, she laid out the pieces on her bed. Bertie's journals, the scratched Polaroids, the circle carvings, the tapes, the grave markers. 12 sites, always 5 children. Always a symbol, always a final phrase. Circle closed. Except the Georgia circle hadn't closed. Neither had Split Creek. Someone had tried to finish the rituals and failed. Or worse, they were trying to finish what others never completed. Mara stood in front of the mirror. Her reflection was pale, eyes sunken, but her resolve had never been sharper. Tomorrow she would return to Texas to find the origin, the first circle, because if she could find the beginning, maybe she could stop the end. March 24th, 2024, Split Creek, Texas. The oldest maps didn't show parcels or plots. They showed land claims, deeds scribbled in cursive along dry creek beds and oak-lined ridges. In the town records office, Mara traced a 1947 surveyor's map stretched across 2 folding tables. Most names meant nothing, but one detail stopped her. Carter, East Field Tract. Vacated 1952. An arrow pointed to a spot half a mile from the present-day Carter farm. It wasn't on any current registry. No roads, no structures, just wilderness. Beside it, scrawled in faded ink, Circle 1, initiated. The handwriting matched Bertie's journal. That afternoon, Mara and 2 deputies waded through switchgrass under a scorching sun. GPS led them to a thicket of dead yucca and cracked earth. There's something here, Rosales said, crouching. Concrete. Not a slab, a cap. They scraped away the dirt. A rusted cast-iron lid bolted to a ring of concrete. Spirals etched into the surface. 5 X-shaped runes, and along the edge, nearly erased by time, only the first shall remain closed until the final is complete. Mara whispered, "Seal it and bury it." They had found Circle 1. Forensics arrived. It took hours to breach the lid. When the final bolt snapped, a sour wave of air escaped. Earth, decay, time itself. Inside, a pit, circular, lined with stone. Unlike the others, this had been arranged with precision. 5 shallow recesses carved into the clay walls. Each one cradled child-sized skeletal remains. But what truly horrified them were the objects placed in each child's arms. A doll of twine, a polished animal skull, a hand-drawn map, a white feather wrapped in red thread, a small iron key. "Tokens," Mara said. "Offerings." At the base, sealed in wax, lay a wooden plaque. Circle 1 complete. 1952. "We give these 5 unto the earth that the foundation may be set. Let those who come after build the remaining 11 in honor of the keeper. Let the cycle not be broken. S.C. Samuel Carter." That night, Mara sat in the evidence room, staring at her list. 12 circles, 8 confirmed, 4 missing. What if those 4 hadn't happened yet? What if, after Samuel died, others had tried to continue the ritual but failed to finish it? She opened the VHS logs. One tape stood out. Circle 12, pending. No date. The footage was mostly static, until a single frame flickered. A child standing in a room painted red. A candle. A muffled voice. "Soon the wheel will turn. The last 5 will make it whole." Mara called the FBI. Special Agent Dobbins picked up. "We're wrong," Mara said. "It's not about legacy. It's not even about belief." "Then what?" Mara's voice was steel. "It's a countdown. March 25th, 2024, Texas-Louisiana border." The 12th circle was already in motion. Mara felt it, in her bones, the way some people feel storms. The FBI's digital team isolated a background frame from the Circle 12 tape. Red walls, chipped blue trim, arched windows. It matched an old Catholic orphanage in Louisiana, shuttered in 1998 after a string of disappearances. It was still standing, condemned, boarded, forgotten. Mara and Dobbins arrived at dawn. Inside, mildew, rot, silence. But the nursery matched the tape. Red walls, a single melted candle. Symbols scratched into the floor, chalk and blood. They found the first child upstairs. Alive, drugged, wrapped in a sheet. A boy, 10 maybe. He whispered one phrase again and again. "We were the 5. I was the feather." Back at the FBI field office in Shreveport, the task force mobilized. 4 more children had vanished in 60 days. Braden Lee, 9, San Antonio. Lucia Mercado, 11, Houston. TJ Blackwood, 7, Nacogdoches. Alina Bright, 10, Lafayette. Each had described dreams, circles, red rooms, a man with no face and a voice that prayed. Someone had reached them before they vanished. Mara pieced together the final passage from Birdie's cellar. The last shall mirror the first. The tokens must match. The doll, the skull, the feather, the key, the map. One keeper to bind them, one place to finish. She flipped to Samuel's original 1952 map. In a faded corner, Circle 12 site, Eden's Gate. Not on modern maps, but it appeared once, in a 1939 land deed. A forested tract near the Sabine River, a family retreat, long abandoned, still registered to the Carters. No one had been there in 60 years. Until now. A convoy of black SUVs thundered through the winding back roads of East Texas as dusk bled into the trees. Mara sat in the lead vehicle, shotgun across her lap, heart pounding like a war drum. The GPS blinked. The turnoff was near. A narrow trail just wide enough for a single car cut through the dense pines. They parked a half-mile out and advanced on foot. The forest was quiet except for the crunch of boots and the faint hum of insects. The air smelled like cedar, old water, and the weight of something sacred and wrong. Then, through the thinning trees, they saw it. A clearing. In the center, 5 wooden stumps arranged in a perfect circle. Each stump bore an object: a scorched map, a doll of twine soaked in something dark, a polished skull resting on silk, a brass key dulled by time, a white feather, its tip charred. Shallow trenches surrounded them. 5 graves waiting. Agent Dobbins raised her hand. Movement, east side. Flashlight snapped on. 2 men emerged from the trees, both armed. One was Matthew Tenko. The other, unmistakably older, was Thomas Carter. He smiled like a man stepping into a place of worship. "Too late," he called. "They've been chosen. You can't stop it now." "Drop your weapons," Dobbins shouted. They didn't. Thomas lifted his voice. "We are the final keepers. This land is ready." Gunfire cracked. A flash from the tree line. Dobbins went down. Mara dove, rolled, fired. Tenko dropped. Thomas fled. Agents surged into the clearing. One trench was already filled. A child's hand poked through the dirt. A cry echoed from the brush. A girl's voice. Mara sprinted toward it, clawing through thorns. There, Adelina Bright, tied to a tree, wide-eyed and shaking. Mara cut her free. "You're safe," she whispered, cradling the girl. "You're safe." But she wasn't sure she believed it. Not yet. By dawn, they had recovered 2 more children. One trench contained remains. One trench remained empty. And Thomas Carter had vanished into the woods. The 12th circle wasn't complete, but Mara knew he was trying to finish it. Close the loop Samuel Carter had opened 70 years ago. And somewhere, one child was still missing. March 26, 2024. Sabine River Basin, East Texas. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when the manhunt began. Helicopters from the Texas Department of Public Safety buzzed the pine canopy. K-9 units combed ravines and deer trails. Search parties moved like phantoms, rifles drawn, radios alive. They were chasing one man, Thomas Carter, the last known keeper, and the only one who knew where the 5th child was. Mara stood in the desecrated clearing, eyes fixed on the final trench. Still open. Still waiting. The symbolism crushed her chest. He hadn't finished the circle. Not yet. But he hadn't given up. The recovered children, Braden, Lucia, Adelina, were alive, drugged, dehydrated, but alive. Each recalled fragments, prayers, candles, red rooms, a man who whispered holiness, but one boy was still unaccounted for, T.J. Blackwood, age 7. Last seen in a church parking lot in Nacogdoches. At 10:41 a.m., a bloodhound caught a scent, leading northeast, toward an abandoned hunting lodge near the river bend, once owned by the Carter family, forgotten after Samuel's death. The porch sagged. The shutters hung like broken ribs. The front door creaked open. Mara entered with SWAT behind her. Inside, rot, pamphlets, symbols carved into wood. Animal bones, dried herbs. In the corner, a child's jacket. Blue, TJ's, still warm. Tracks led out back. Drag marks, adult-sized footprints. They followed them through muck and roots and down into a limestone cave near the river. Dark, echoing, reeking of wax and death. Mara crouched, flashlight slicing the black. Ahead, movement. Thomas Carter, dragging a burlap sack. "Thomas!" she yelled. He didn't stop. "You don't have to do this. The circle's already broken." He turned, eyes hollow, mud streaking his skin like ceremonial ash. "You don't understand," he said. "They won't sleep, not until the 12th is sealed. The old blood. It's mine. It always was." "Let him go," Mara said. The sack moved. A small hand pushed against the burlap. Still alive. Thomas reached into his coat. Mara raised her weapon, but he didn't pull a gun. He pulled a key. Old iron. Familiar. "I was the key," he said. "Samuel gave it to me when I was 7, told me I'd open the last door, but I waited too long." "Drop it, Thomas." His voice cracked. "I remember every name, every scream, and I still hear them." He knelt, placed the key on the stone floor, and he wept. SWAT moved. TJ was alive, wrapped in Mara's coat, clinging to her like an anchor. Thomas Carter didn't resist. For the first time in 41 years, all 5 children of the final circle were accounted for. Every trench empty. That night, Mara stood outside the hospital. The stars flickered above her like ancient scars. 12 circles, dozens of victims. One boy's escape had shattered it all. The chain hadn't broken from violence, it broke from survival, and from a final keeper who chose to stop, who finally, mercifully, chose not to finish what his father began. A convoy of black SUVs thundered through the winding back roads of East Texas as dusk bled into the trees. Mara sat in the lead vehicle, shotgun across her lap, heart pounding like a war drum. The GPS blinked. The turnoff was near. A narrow trail, just wide enough for a single car, cut through the dense pines. They parked a half-mile out and advanced on foot. The forest was quiet except for the crunch of boots and the faint hum of insects. The air smelled like cedar, old water, and the weight of something sacred and wrong. Then, through the thinning trees, they saw it. A clearing. In the center, 5 wooden stumps arranged in a perfect circle. Each stump bore an object, a scorched map, a doll of twine soaked in something dark, a polished skull resting on silk, a brass key dulled by time, a white feather, its tip charred. Shallow trenches surrounded them, 5 graves waiting. Agent Dobbins raised her hand. Movement, east side. Flashlight snapped on. 2 men emerged from the trees, both armed. One was Matthew Tenko. The other, unmistakably older, was Thomas Carter. He smiled, like a man stepping into a place of worship. "Too late," he called. "They've been chosen. You can't stop it now." "Drop your weapons," Dobbins shouted. They didn't. Thomas lifted his voice. "We are the final keepers. This land is ready." Gunfire cracked. A flash from the tree line. Dobbins went down. Mara dove, rolled, fired. Tenko dropped. Thomas fled. Agents surged into the clearing. One trench was already filled. A child's hand poked through the dirt. A cry echoed from the brush. A girl's voice. Mara sprinted toward it, clawing through thorns. There, Adelina Bright, tied to a tree, wide-eyed and shaking. Mara cut her free. "You're safe," she whispered, cradling the girl. "You're safe." But she wasn't sure she believed it. Not yet. By dawn, they had recovered 2 more children. One trench contained remains. One trench remained empty. And Thomas Carter had vanished into the woods. The 12th circle wasn't complete. But Mara knew he was trying to finish it. Close the loop Samuel Carter had opened 70 years ago. And somewhere, one child was still missing. March 26th, 2024. Sabine River Basin, East Texas. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when the manhunt began. Helicopters from the Texas Department of Public Safety buzzed the pine canopy. K-9 units combed ravines and deer trails. Search parties moved like phantoms, rifles drawn, radios alive. They were chasing one man, Thomas Carter, the last known keeper, and the only one who knew where the 5th child was. Mara stood in the desecrated clearing, eyes fixed on the final trench. Still open, still waiting. The symbolism crushed her chest. He hadn't finished the circle, not yet, but he hadn't given up. The recovered children, Braden, Lucia, Adelina, were alive, drugged, dehydrated, but alive. Each recalled fragments, prayers, candles, red rooms, a man who whispered holiness, but one boy was still unaccounted for. T.J. Blackwood, age 7, last seen in a church parking lot in Nacogdoches. At 10:41 a.m., a bloodhound caught a scent, leading northeast, toward an abandoned hunting lodge near the river bend, once owned by the Carter family. forgotten after Samuel's death. The porch sagged. The shutters hung like broken ribs. The front door creaked open. Mara entered with SWAT behind her. Inside, rot, pamphlets, symbols carved into wood, animal bones, dried herbs. In the corner, a child's jacket, blue, TJ's, still warm, tracks led out back, drag marks, adult-sized footprints. They followed them through muck and roots and down into a limestone cave near the river, dark, echoing, reeking of wax and death. Mara crouched, flashlight slicing the black. Ahead. Movement. Thomas Carter, dragging a burlap sack. "Thomas!" she yelled. He didn't stop. "You don't have to do this. The circle's already broken." He turned, eyes hollow, mud streaking his skin like ceremonial ash. "You don't understand," he said. "They won't sleep, not until the 12th is sealed. The old blood. It's mine. It always was." "Let him go," Mara said. The sack moved. A small hand pushed against the burlap. Still alive. Thomas reached into his coat. Mara raised her weapon, but he didn't pull a gun. He pulled a key. Old, iron, familiar. "I was the key," he said. "Samuel gave it to me when I was 7. Told me I'd open the last door, but I waited too long." "Drop it, Thomas." His voice cracked. I remember every name, every scream, and I still hear them. He knelt, placed the key on the stone floor, and he wept. SWAT moved. TJ was alive, wrapped in Mara's coat, clinging to her like an anchor. Thomas Carter didn't resist. For the first time in 41 years, all 5 children of the final circle were accounted for. Every trench, empty. That night, Mara stood outside the hospital. The stars flickered above her like ancient scars. 12 circles, dozens of victims. One boy's escape had shattered it all. The chain hadn't broken from violence. It broke from survival, and from a final keeper who chose to stop, who finally, mercifully, chose not to finish what his father began. At dawn, Thomas Carter gave his full confession. Names, dates, burial sites, branch leaders, rituals, tapes, maps, tokens. He said the circles began in 1952 with 5 children chosen by Samuel Carter, buried beneath what would become the family's eastern field. Each new generation of keepers believed continuing the ritual preserved the balance between the living and the land. But the truth was simpler. It was control, power, obsession, and fear. Samuel Carter believed something would rise if the cycle wasn't completed. Something from beneath. He never knew what, only that it demanded sacrifice. Mara wrote the final words in her report just after midnight. Circle 12, aborted. All known victims recovered or confirmed deceased. Primary perpetrator in custody. Cult infrastructure dismantled across 4 states. Case closed. But she left one line open, because not every name had been recovered, and not every circle had been mapped. The truth she feared was this: there may have been more than 12. March 30th, 2024. Split Creek, Texas. The land behind the Carter farm was still now. No tape, no choppers, just wind through grass. And the sound of insects coming back to a field that had long held its breath. Mara stood at the rim of the cistern pit, now drained, excavated. The tents were gone, the bones bagged. The earth still felt heavy. She crouched, touched the soil, cold, damp, remembering. Since the arrest, the investigation had exploded. 17 unmarked sites, 4 states, 4 surviving keepers, old and broken by time or madness. They said it had stopped long ago. They were wrong. The doctrine of the circle had lived on. 70 years of hidden theology, passed like gospel from pulpit to pasture. Its symbols, language, and tokens weren't folklore. They were scripture. 47 children, confirmed, still counting. In the makeshift war room, Mara stood before a corkboard full of string, maps, and photographs. The earliest, 1952. The latest, 2024. 72 years. Thomas Carter's confession closed the 12th circle. But who wrote the rules? Samuel might have started the rituals. But in Bertie's journal, Mara found references to a book, a handwritten manual, passed through generations. That book was missing. On her last day in Split Creek, she went to the town library. An old volunteer, Miss Given, helped her dig through microfiche archives. There it was, a 1961 article. Local pastor warns of demonic doctrine in Carter Hollow. Pastor James Harlan, New Hope Chapel. He spoke of fire circles, children, and a book with a broken spine. No follow-up. 2 years later, Harlan drowned. Ruled accidental. That evening, Mara drove to the chapel ruins. Nothing left but a stone foundation. There, under dead leaves, a rusted trap door. Beneath it, a cellar, dry, silent. On a shelf wrapped in oilcloth, a book, black leather, cracked spine, inside spirals, circles, diagrams, children holding tokens, 12 entries, and one blank page, circle 13. She burned it at dawn. Page by page, scattered the ashes into the cistern, and the soil finally felt still. 2 weeks later, Mara went home. The story had gone national. Podcasts, documentaries, talk shows. They called it the Circle Cult. She never watched. She just kept one photograph over her desk. 5 children, holding hands in a field, each now identified, each now buried. Some stories don't end. They wait to be dug up again. But this one, she buried deep. Because the dirt never forgets. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it forgives. April 20th, 2024. Split Creek, Texas. The Carter land was sold to the county. The house, the barn, gone. In their place, a field. A wooden sign, Memorial Field. In memory of the lost. No names, just a spiral of 5 smooth stones, and in the corner, flowers blooming again, bluebonnets, paintbrush, wild sunflowers. People said the soil was bad. Maybe it was the drainage, or the light. Most said nothing. Mara visited once more before transferring. She stood at the old cistern site, hands in her coat, watching dusk fall. A boy stood near the stones, barefoot, smiling, then gone. Mara didn't call out. She just whispered, "You're free now," and let the dark take the rest.